Okie dokie. Unit 6. Dearest Texas history scholars, I hope you're having a great day. We're looking at Unit 6, Part 2, Early Statehood. During the era of early statehood, Texas is annexed into the United States. That means they got married. And then almost immediately the next year, there's a war, the Mexican-American War. And then the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ends the war. And then the Compromise of 1850 breaks Texas into the size that it is now. And this is brought about by a slavery issue in the United States, which ultimately results in the Civil War, but this is before the Civil War, 1850. The Civil War is not until 1861. So in order to delay the Civil War, they have a compromise of 1850. Okay, events, individuals' events, and issues during Texas statehood. The Mexican-American War is caused when Mexico claims that the Nueces River is the border between Mexico and Texas, but the United States and Texas both claim that it's the Rio Grande River. The war began at Brownsville, which is the very southern tip of Texas. This is a small battle, and then the war goes on. It's pretty quick. And then there is a Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo where everyone agrees that the war should be over. Guadalupe Hidalgo. This ends the Mexican-American War, and it also results in the Mexican Cession, which is part of OMG, BLT, UFO, which we've already been learning about. It's that one. It's just south of the Oregon Territory. Mexican Cession, which is the southwest, is claimed by the United States. Mexico accepts Texas as part of the United States. And then Mexico pays $15 million to the United States pays $15 million to Mexico just to solidify the treaty. Hey, we're going to take this much land. You don't have a choice, but we're also paying you for it, so you can't be too mad. The Rio Grande River is established as the southern border of Texas. Population growth. Population doubled after annexation. People start flooding into Texas after it becomes part of the United States. The largest city is going to be Galveston until the year 1900 when a huge hurricane hits. Migration of Americans to Texas. So because Texas is part of America, it's migration. And then when they come from a new country, that's immigration, come from a different country. So Europeans start to come to Texas. Specifically, Germans come to the hill country of Texas. The Compromise of 1850 has to do with slavery. Remember the slavery issue? This is a very complicated process, super complicated. The Texas-New Mexico Boundary Act stated that Texas would receive $10 million in return for giving up their western and northern territory to pay off Texas debt. So it breaks off that little tail on the top of Texas. And then they determine a new western boundary of the state. And this agreement is intended to deal with slavery. Ooh, we should probably pause and talk about that and how it led to the Civil War. Or not. Okay, last page of notes. Geographic distribution and patterns in Texas during the 19th century. During the mid-1800s, Texas experiences a large wave of immigration from many European nations. This wave, including the immigration, that should say included, the immigration of Germans, Wends, Swedes, Poles, Irish, Swiss, French, Norwegians, Hungarians, and Czechs. By 1850, Texans' population was over 200,000. By the 1860s, the number of people living in Texas reached more than 600,000. Yet in 1836, it had been approximately 50,000. We could draw this on a graph if we wanted. We might do that. Enslaved African Americans were brought to Texas in large numbers during this time period because slavery was legal. So then most of them are settling on cotton plantations located in East Texas. Hey, wait a second. That means coastal plains. I'm going to write that right here. More than 2,000 families settled in Peters County in North Texas near present-day Dallas during the 1840s. Many small towns were established by immigrants, and most people lived in rural as opposed to city or urban. That means like country areas, with settlement concentrated in the eastern and central portions of the state. If people are coming because of cheap land, which is the reason that they came to Texas, then of course they're going to buy farms. They're going to live on large open spaces, meaning that the majority of Texas at this time is going to be country, rural, small towns. Let's look at why. Why immigrant groups came to Texas and where they settled. Several prominent Mexican families established ranches in South Texas even after the abandonment of missions in Texas, just because there was so much land available. Mexican families immigrated to Texas as part of the De Leon colony. That was an impresario. And they established along the Guadalupe River near Victoria. Irish settlers coming from Ireland, they also immigrate to Texas on 2 land grants from the Spanish government during the early 1800s. The majority of settlers came to Texas as part of impresario land grants from the United States. The attraction of cheap land, that's important, resulted in a wave of immigration in the mid-1800s that brought thousands of European immigrants to Texas. Among them were Germans. I already read this sentence, this exact same sentence. Among them were Germans, Wends, Swedes, Poles, Irish, Swiss, French, Norwegians, Hungarians, and Czechs. Many of these immigrants came seeking economic opportunities. They were fleeing conflicts in 1848 in Europe, and they were also trying to get away from the potato famine. Oh, there's not an O right there. That's an E. Potato famine. The potato famine also led to a lot of gang activities and crime in the East Coast, like you could see in the movie Gangs of New York, which I don't recommend because it's extremely violent and not appropriate for children. But if you were to watch it, it's caused by the potato famine, sort of. Okay, Germans primarily settled in New Braunfels, with many German towns established along the German Belt, which goes from Galveston westward toward the hill country. Americans and enslaved African Americans mostly settled in East Texas. Oh, that means coastal plains. Blah, 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 blah. French people settled near San Antonio. Italians settled in urban areas near the Texas coast. Oh, that's also the coastal plains. In the 1870s, Chinese immigrants. Hey, this is super important to the history of the American West and to Western culture. So that's like really, really, really important. In the 1870s, Chinese immigrants came to Texas to help build the railroad. They eventually settled in urban areas like Houston and El Paso. All right, there you have it. Boom. That was your entire, there's your notes. Now you're ready for a quiz.